Hey, welcome back to the Victory 4x4 Garage. My name is Daryl. Today I'm going to show you how to install our roof rack for the second and third gen double cab Toyota Tacomas. It goes together really easy, so let's get started. So the first thing we want to do in assembly is bolt this together pretty loosely. We are going to grab a button head and a washer and put it through the first slot on the side rail and screw it into the threaded portion of this aluminum extrusion. So we are going to do 2 of these button heads with washers per side on each aluminum extrusion crossbar. And we're just going to work our way down the sidebars on each side, bolting all of these crossbars in really loosely. All right, go ahead and bolt on both sides to the crossbars and snug these button head bolts up enough so the rack isn't all floppy when you lift it, but you can still slide these bars for adjustability once it's up on your roof. Now we're going to bolt on the front and rear fairings, and we're going to do that with a button head bolt, a washer on the outside, and one of these flange nuts here on the inside. And once we bolt this on, we're going to make sure that it's up all the way on its slots, just to give us some adjustability once we get it on the truck. Once it's up there, we can loosen these bolts and adjust it against the roof. Now we're going to install this rear fairing, and you're going to do that with the bent flange on the top and this radius portion on the bottom. Same deal as before, button head bolts with a washer on the outside and a flange nut on the inside. Once you get all of these button heads installed, go ahead and pull the fairing all the way up to the top of its adjustment and snug these down, and then we can adjust the height of it later once the rack is on the truck. All right, so we're going to offer a couple different versions of these front fairings, and if you have one for a light bar, you might as well install that light bar right now. We have these brackets here that mount on top of the extrusion, and they do that with these little extrusion nuts here. Now on the production version of these racks, there'll be a slot on the top that is machined out for this to slide in, so you don't have to unbolt this to slide the T-nut in. So you want to make sure that you mount that slot to the top when you mount these rails on, but this rack doesn't have it. So all we have to do on this rack is loosen the nuts on the side and lift it up just a little bit and slide those T-nuts in. It's going to be 2 per mount per side. Then once those slide in, we can put it back down. So your version of the rack will have those slots, but if you forget to put them in an orientation that you can get to them, you can still really easily slide those T-nuts in. Now you can go ahead and mount your light bar brackets onto those T-nuts that you installed. It's going to look like this. So the flat portion of the mount is going to point outside. So all that's on the inside is this bracket for your light to attach to. And those just go on the top of this aluminum extrusion here. And just mount those loosely so we can change the width for our specific light bar. Now you can go ahead and bolt on your light bar of choice. Most likely you're going to use the stud mount option with that light bar, and just loosely bolt it on each side. You're most likely going to have to adjust the angle of this and stuff once you get it on the truck, but it's a lot easier to do with it here on the ground, as long as you have someone to help you pick the rack up. If you don't have someone to help you pick the rack up, then you may want to think about a different assembly order on this. But this is the easiest way we've found, is to assemble it all on the ground and then lift it up onto the vehicle. Now we're going to bolt on these side pieces, but a quick word about these. This whole rack's aluminum, the sides, the cross beams, except for these. We make these out of steel, and that is for strength. You'll see some companies that bend a flange off these aluminum sides 90 degrees, and you bolt through that flange to a spacer to the roof. Now over time we've seen those 90-degree bends crack. Just from use, from weight on the rack. Steel is so much stronger in this application, and there's not that much weight if you're talking about just these 6 brackets, so we felt like this was a way better choice. So what you're going to do is, just like everything else, you're going to take a button head bolt and a washer, and you're going to loosely bolt these brackets on the inside of the rails. Everything is mirrored except for these right here. There's 2 separate front pieces. We're working on the passenger side of the rack here. The middle mount and the back mount are interchangeable on each side, but these front mounts are different. Once you bolt this front mount on, you're going to see this flange that goes on the roof kind of angle upward like this if you're working on the rack on its edge like that. Once you get them bolted on, if you're looking at the rack from the bottom, these flanges will taper out towards the front of the truck. Go ahead and just loosely bolt them on with a button head and a washer and a flange nut, just like the fairings you bolted on before. On the middle and on the back brackets, you're going to see 2 flanges, one with a slotted hole and one with a round hole. The slotted hole is what goes against the sides of the rack. These mounts are going to be adjustable up and down, but not so much forwards and backwards, so just kind of set them where you think they're going to go and snug these down, and you have lots of options to change the height of the rack later once it's up on the truck. Okay, now we're going to remove this rubber molding on the roof. You just got to pull it up all the way back. There's a little bit of 3M adhesive on there. We'll save this for later. All right, you're going to find some tape here in 3 locations, on the front, on the middle, and in the rear. It looks like it's metal, but it's not. It's just painted tape. And you'll see right where the holes are in the factory, and there's some nut inserts in here, but first we have to break through the tape. So the easiest way to do that is just grab a 1/2-inch drill bit, and you can do it in a drill, or you could just spin it by hand. And you're just gonna spin that tape out of there, and you'll see the hole in the roof with the factory nutsert. Go ahead and do that on the front, and then there's 1 in the middle, 1 hole in the middle, and then 2 holes on the rear. Do this on both sides. Once you get those holes opened up and the tape kind of cleared away, you're going to want to take some RTV and just liberally apply it all over around these holes so that when we set the rack on, it sets down into RTV. Use a bunch of RTV here. There are times to be stingy with RTV, and this is not one of those times. Go ahead and gob it on the front, the middle, and the rear on each side, and then we're going to set the rack into this RTV to create a weather-tight seal. Go ahead and set this on your RTV, and you really got one shot at this, so try to line the holes up when you set it down. All right, now once we get this rack on the roof, we're going to work on each one of these little feet individually. And the first thing you want to do is loosen up the side bolt, or both side bolts if you're working on the front or rear, just so you have some movability here on this mount. Then you want to make sure that you can see that weld nut on the top of the roof inside of this bracket. And if that's the case, I want you to take a bunch of RTV and push it in the hole where that weld nut is and in the hole for your bracket. That's going to make sure that this bolt goes through RTV and water doesn't get down into it. We're going to give you some longer metric bolts here and some larger washers. So these would be unique to all the other bolts in the kit. And then you're going to want to just hand thread this first through the bracket into the captured nut on the roof. And you want to hand thread it just so you make sure that you're not cross threading anything. And then once you get that started, you can go ahead and tighten it all the way down. And you're going to pull that bracket into the RTV so you get good squeeze on that. And then after that's done, you can pick the rack up. I'd recommend picking it up all the way against the top of its adjustment and then tighten up the mount onto the side. Go ahead and repeat that step on the other 5 mounts on the rack. A quick word of warning on tightening those bolts that go into the roof. They're stainless, so you want to be careful not to tighten them too much because you could strip the head or you could break the bolts. So be careful on tightening those. Once you get all of those bolts tightened, go ahead and, like I said, pick this rack all the way up and then tighten down all of the side mount bolts for the rack. And then you can go ahead and put these crossbars where you want them, and you can tighten those bolts down as well. If you have a sunroof, you're going to want to put this bar right here that goes across the sunroof all the way forward, and you can still open your sunroof to vent it. But if you have this bar loaded down with a ton of weight on it, it could technically flex into that open sunroof. It would have to be a lot of weight, but we're just letting you know. You may want to pull this bar if you want to keep the sunroof vented, not open, but vented, with a ton of weight pressing on the center of that bar, but that's totally dependent on your application. Okay, so once you get all these bolts tightened up, you can go ahead and grab the factory rubber gasket trim or whatever you want to call it that goes on here, and you can trim this up. I guess this is the back right here. You can trim this up so it works and sticks back in here up to each mount, then trim the mountain portion out, and then you can put it in there with some 3M tape or whatever you need to hold that in, and that'll finish that up really nice. Now's the time you also want to adjust these front and rear fairings. And on the front here, you can either adjust it high enough off the roof so there's plenty of room so it doesn't touch, or you may be able to install some edge trim here on the bottom, some like door edge trim, and then push it down against the roof, and then it will make a tight seal against the roof. It's really your preference. Same thing in the rear. All right, that's it. After you get all those bolts tightened, you're ready to mount whatever you want on top of it. If you have any questions about the install of this product or any of our products here at Victory 4x4, shoot us an email at tech@victory4x4.com or call us at 269-459-8447. Thanks for becoming part of the Victory 4x4 family, and we'll talk to you later.